So, good morning, everybody. I'm very honored to be here to present at the Matrix conference. It's always great to be at a real open source event and not just some, let's say, fancy other conference, which is good. But here I have to say I feel more at home because my background is really about researching open source software, advocating open source software since over 20 years now, mainly in Switzerland, but I'm also involved in all other international projects and initiatives. So my background is between computer science and business administration, and I am also working at the University of Bern and Bern University of Applied Sciences, and also involved in politics, and that's also one of the topics of today's speech about this new law in Switzerland that demands the government to open source everything they program under an open source license. We have an interesting group in Bern, actually the capital of Switzerland, of 60 people, very interdisciplinary people who have technical skills, but also legal skills, and we also have a Matrix server installed in our institute, so we are experimenting with the tool, so it's really interesting also to look at, to be in this place as today, because I think this is really a very vibrant community going on. Our focus at the Institute of Public Sector Transformation is very broad. However, today I'm focusing on three topics: open source, digital sovereignty, and the procurement of software. Because procurement in government agencies is always a very important topic. If you're interested, I still have 2 paper copies, real dead wood, here with me in German, although. So, what I'm going to talk about first, let's see how far we are or how not far we are in Switzerland regarding open source software. Second, let me show you the current discussion we are doing in Switzerland regarding digital sovereignty, a topic that Amandine mentioned in the first speech. And then finally, what can we do? What can everybody of us do at the moment to get this thing going forward? Now, the topic of open source software in Switzerland is not new. Actually, it is exactly 20 years ago when the Swiss government said, we want to impose an open source strategy. This is the title of the open source strategy for the Swiss federal government 20 years ago. It said, well, we want to, we discovered this new type of software development 20 years ago, you might remember, and we want to use these possibilities and create alternatives to CSS, closed source software. Well, anyway, so this is many years ago. 20 years later, and the good and bad things happened in between. Switzerland has a digital strategy, and to this year actually has one of the core topics is open source software. And this is very unique because Switzerland is known as a very Microsoft, SAP, Oracle oriented country, very proprietary, very business driven. But this year actually the government realized that open source actually supports and promotes digital sovereignty. In fact, this open source study, since many years, every 3 years we analyze how much open source software is being used in Switzerland. So here I think we are not so bad. We calculate and make surveys, and it's over 97% of all the companies and the government agencies use open source software in one or the other place. You can find much more details in the study, where and how they use open source and how they release. So I think we are not, a very high level of usage is happening. And there are also some of the projects going on using open source as an alternative to M365. You probably have heard of OpenDesk, the open source alternative to M365 by the Zendis in Germany, and we are also testing this in Switzerland. So there are some things going on, some feasibility study that tries to support this. What I'm focusing now is, however, the topic of public money, public code. This is the claim by the Free Software Foundation Europe since many years. This was a campaign actually with nice video. You probably have seen it, and if not, have a look at it. And this is really the main message. If we put taxpayers' money into IT projects, which costs millions and millions, we want to have the most benefit out of it. And that's the claim. If we have taxpayers' money, we want to access the code and use the code also for other purposes. And in fact, there are stories in Swiss IT history which are quite successful using public money for public code. So remember the certificates COVID-19, which was developed by the Swiss government and later used by the Austrian government as the greener pass for also their citizens. And so the open source software was reused in Austria, and then bug fixes and issues came back to Switzerland. Or cantons, like the regions in Switzerland, use open source to actually develop together some workflow system. So this is happening with Caluma and Inosca, projects which were developed mainly by the company Adfinis in Switzerland. And finally, there is also Open Rail Association, association of European rail companies, rail associations, and which is mainly driven also from the SBB, from the Swiss Federal Rail Association. So they collaborate with the German rail, Deutsche Bahn and SNCF and so on. And so they collaborate on open source software development because they want to be more independent from the industry players. Now, when we talk about open source, one of my main activities during the last 16 years was managing this group of parliamentarians, ParlDigi. We started with open source software lobbying in the Swiss parliament and broadened quite a bit all around open topics. Actually, we should add one more. Open source AI is currently very hot, obviously, with things we'll see in a moment. But open source was always the core of our activities. So this is the core team of the parliamentarian group. There are members from all different parties, from the very left to the very right parties in Switzerland, which actually can collaborate quite well on the topic of open source and open government data. And this is also one of the, let's say, reasons why we have now this kind of open source promoting law, which I will show in a moment. So going back 14 years, actually, it was the Swiss Federal Court which started the whole idea that the government could and should open source software. The Swiss Federal Court started the platform Open Justitia, which is still online today. It looks like a very kind of oldish website. You remember like the websites without any responsive design and so on. So it's still online today. We actually awarded them awards just that the things gets more publicity. And their goal was really to share their court management software with other Swiss courts and eventually also international courts, because they realized very soon, very early, that open source software collaboration is something which helps to speed up and increase quality also in judicial systems. However, it was not automatically successful. There was a political dispute. We started with this ParlDigi group to promote promotion of open source software. So one politician asked, so we could do this, and well, we should do this. However, there was a very little local company in Bern which actually opposed to this idea that the government or the Swiss Federal Court open source software. Why did they do this? Well, they sold proprietary software to courts in Switzerland, and their business model was in danger because soon, possibly, Swiss courts could base their court management system on open source software and their proprietary product would fade out. Now, this company was very clever. They asked a politician in Switzerland to really challenge the Swiss among us. They know this guy is a very rightist party member, and he asked, like, why does the government actually destroy Swiss businesses, small SMEs, basically innovative companies with their open source activities, and we should actually stop them publishing open source software, because it's not the job of the government to destroy the innovative industry with open source software. Now, we think, or I thought, well, this is just ridiculous. However, the government, they actually said, well, okay, we have to figure out if this is allowed, that the government enters the private sector and distributes software among them and destroys their market. So what they did actually, they asked lawyers, professors to write a legal opinion, and astonishingly, they found out, well, it's not allowed, that the government has no foundation, no law, no legal basis to enter this market. And so they wrote a very long legal opinion study to argue why the government would need a new law and would need completely new basis. Back then it was very frustrating, because we realized, well, this is basically the end, not just for the federal court, but actually for all the Swiss government agencies open sourcing software. Luckily, it's not, well, the lawyers, you know, what can you do if you disagree with one lawyer? You just ask another lawyer. And so what we did, we asked lawyers, very renowned lawyers, to write another legal opinion about the same question, and astonishingly they found out that the opposite. Basically the opposite is saying that open source software definitely is no problem to the market, because it's just some raw software. There is no commercial service behind it, and if you want to run an IT system in a court, you need companies or internal resource, so you don't just install the software and everything is fine. So therefore, no bad feeling, no problem, open sourcing software by the government. Now, nevertheless, Swiss are very precise, as you know, and also very slow, and therefore they didn't really kind of activate this yet, but they said, well, we probably still need a law to be sure that we don't do anything not illegal. So therefore, they actually issued the first version of this EMBAG law, or EMOTA law, 2019 something, and they said, well, let's give it a try. Let's allow the government to open source software. So they allowed federal governments to open source software. In our association, CH Open, fostering open source software, we recommended basically to adapt this paragraph, that they not are just allowed to open source software, but they're actually supposed to open source software, and it's everything. And this was, in some parts, it was actually taken up by the updated version of the law, and it was improved in a way that, if possible, and if it makes sense, then the government is allowed to open source software. Nevertheless, we realized we need more lobbying to actually make it mandatory, and that's when we actually activated very emails and politicians and so on. And so with this group, we took many actions, and finally in the end it came out very well. And so this is the Federal Act on the Use of Electronic Means to Carry Out Official Tasks, EMOTA. And this Article 9 actually explicitly now mandates the government to open source all software that is being written by members of the government or by third-party contributors or third-party providers. So unless the rights of third parties, well, the copyright or security reasons would stop it. So there is some loophole, let's say, but in general, nowadays it's very common that this EMBAG law is being enforced. My colleague Rika Koch, she just wrote a paper in an international journal about this new Swiss open source software obligation. We also were at FOSDEM last year presenting this, and we're going to Milano next month. So we try to promote this in Switzerland and also internationally, that everybody basically knows it, because a law is useless if it's not known and not enforced. We also wrote to the European Union, to the OSOR Open Source Observatory. They put news, and then interestingly, a year ago, it was taken up for Satinet and other platforms. Even some YouTuber made a YouTube video about this new Swiss law. And on X, some guys, they also posted about it and liked it. And that is very good news, because I think now it is, we have also a list of documentation how government agencies should release open source software. So Swiss are very slow, but they're precise. And so now they really have a long list of 15 documents which describe in detail how to do open source software. I put in the link. It's in German, but it's also translated in English, so and French, so many others can benefit from it. And in fact, when we look now at the IT call for tenders, we see now in all of these tenders now that this law is mandatory, that if the Swiss government now procures software on procurement platforms, they mandate that the software will be open sourced after it's written, and they even give points like Zuschlagskriterien, like the criteria, like points to the companies providing the offer, if they have experience with open source software, if they have staff members who have open source track record, and so on. So this is really impacting the industry due to this law. And we can also see now on platforms that the government now releases open source software, like this software Loom by the Swiss Cyber Command. We monitor it on ossbenchmark.com, so there is really something now being implemented. In the last few minutes, let me now bring this topic of open source, which I think is very important, to the bigger picture on the geopolitical situation at the moment. So all of you are aware of this call for more digital sovereignty because of the Trump administration now actually facing this threatening the European sovereignty. However, it's also the US government seeking digital sovereignty from the Chinese, and the Chinese government seeking sovereignty from the US software. Just yesterday, I think the government in China announced that they will drop Microsoft Office for WPS and some other office management software. But what is the definition of digital sovereignty? So digital sovereignty is not something which is actually autarky. Autarky is this complete independence. And this is not my idea, but it's actually copied from the Bitkom document. They actually already 10 years ago said, well, sovereignty is something in between external control and autarky. So in external control, we have the problem of data in the public cloud, proprietary software, only AI available through APIs. We have a full vendor lock-in, and there is a loss of competence and technological know-how. On the other side, if we do everything ourselves as Switzerland or Germany or France, then we would need to extract the rare air minerals, building computer chips and so on. So this would lead to lots of welfare loss, and eventually would be like a situation like in North Korea, which has very strong borders. Nevertheless, sovereignty is actually something in between. Sovereignty says we are independent, we are autonomous, and we have self-determination. It actually is based on the choice and alternatives, and this actually leads to more competition, more innovation, more collaboration. And the good thing is we know how to do this. It's all reusing software built by companies, even the big tech companies like Google and so on, and still being able to independently manage and run these software, like Matrix. I don't have to tell you that. So, but it's about software, it's about hardware, it's also AI. So this, I think it's very important to call our leaders and non-technical people to remind it's not autarky, but it's actually sovereignty that we want. In Switzerland, there's a discussion. We wrote a report, and so now the president, they want to pursue it. There are also many political motions and postulates, and there's activity going on, like the Swiss model, AI model I've heard, open source model. It's completely open. Also training data, Apertus. It has a 70 billion parameter parameter model. So it's quite successful driving this forward also in the AI sector. Nevertheless, on a political level, things are not really going forward. So therefore, we decided in summer to actually found a network of digital sovereignty in Switzerland. And it actually was exactly the right moment. Over 70 government agencies and companies and associations joined already because they realized we want digital sovereignty now and not just in 5 or 10 years. So we launched it end of August in Bern with 3 people also from the Zendis who showed us how OpenDesk is working, Open Code is working, and how this also could be implemented in Switzerland and how it could be implemented in any country. So this was also the moment where the news media reported, and I think now we have a good momentum driving this forward. So what's next? Well, you all know what is open source. Nevertheless, sometimes it's good that if you want someone else to understand it, give them something to read. So I can recommend, there are many documents all over the place to understand what are open source communities, how does it work, what are business models and so on, and how can we get out of this vendor lock-in. On an organizational level, obviously nowadays it's the call for OSPOs, open source program offices, so that government and companies using open source and collaborating and having contracts with providers and internal teams manage this well, professionally. The CERN in Geneva, for example, is one of the first Swiss open source program offices. And I really recommend to coordinate, to collaborate. In Switzerland, this is CH Open, the Swiss National Organization for Open Source Software. So we organize many events, many workshops, conferences, and so on. In November, there will be the conference on digital sustainability. We support also Partigi. And there's one thing, finally, to finish up, the open source directory. Have you heard of the open source directory? Probably not, because it's quite new, but let me use this airtime, my final 1 minute, to show this to you. Our vision is quite ambitious. We want to create an open source Wikipedia-like platform where all these success stories, all these news all around open source software could be documented and made visible. So we will have vendors providing professional services. We have clients using open source products, and we have success stories, know-how, events, communities, possibly even jobs. So this is an open source platform provided by our non-profit association, CH Open. It's available in 4 languages: German, English, French, and Italian. And I made some examples. Well, there are more, of course, but if you have, let's say, for example, the open source product, the protocol Matrix, or the Matrix Foundation, it's one of the communities up here, and Element as one of the products using the protocol Matrix, or one of the success stories, BW Messenger from the German army, which uses the Matrix protocol. And if you go to the Bundeswehr, the German army, you can see what else do they use as open source. For example, they decided to go for the OpenDesk. So these are all little examples how you can yourself contribute to this knowledge, to this, let's say, overview. And as you all know, nowadays it's quite easy to generate text. So I even prepared some prompt templates which you can use with your favorite AI bot, and you can generate quite fast with good source and source checking, fact checking, good topics. And you can also use these topics, these things to change it. So you can get access to these portraits of Element and Matrix and so on, and change things if you enhance the links. So open source directory, please have a look and give us a feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthias. Do we have some questions in the room?
So you mentioned there's a loophole in the law. How much is it used?
Very good question. Yeah, so So the question, let's say it's exception from the law that if there is a software, highly security-related software, let's say, which shows how the Swiss government does security things, whatever they do, they are not forced to also release this as open source software. If it's for the really public safety thing, that's the, let's say, possible exception. However, if it's just for some login purpose, then of course that's not the security exception. And one example, the Swiss eID, for example, this electronic ID is also 99% open source. Only the one part which actually is being used for the 3D facial recognition is not open source, because they say, well, if we open source this algorithm, then criminals are able to create false profiles and they know how to cheat the algorithm. Well, but it's, of course, some, let's say, gray area. Yeah, very good question.
Thank you. Sorry, we don't have time for another question.
Thank you very much.